So many family members in my own family, my nuclear family, but also in my ancestry, grapple with alcoholism. And this experience in my family and how we deal with it together sometimes came to issues and practices of gratitude. Is this familiar to anyone who, I'm not nodding, you're like, gratitude, oh yeah. Yes, so we were navigating gratitude practices together, and the first time that I was introduced to a gratitude practice, my aunt had flown out for my undergraduate graduation. She had received my very late announcement because I was a good undergraduate student who thought, right, you send those out, they help, but I sent them out very, very late, maybe 2 weeks before my graduation ceremony, but my auntie was the kind of auntie that flies out anyway, even on late notice, very fairy godmother. And so there was my fairy godmother sitting out on my mother's patio one morning, and she was quietly writing in a journal this long list of thank yous, carefully numbered one by one. Thank you for family to buy very expensive plane tickets to. Thank you for belonging. Thank you for my niece and her graduation. Thank you for these hummingbirds. Thank you for sourdough toast with butter. Thank you, raspberry jam. Thank you, sunrise. Thank you, garden. On and on she went. And she knew when I asked her, Aunt, what are you doing? She said, well, I'm doing my gratitude practice, and I think you should too. She knew at the time that I was going through a breakup and a graduation, transitions of all kinds. And so she encouraged me, keep a list. But if there's anything you might begin to know about me, is that if I find something that works, I have the potential to overuse it. So suddenly my auntie's 20 list of gratitude became, why not, 25, 30, maybe 40 this time, I can push it. Then suddenly my lists were 50 gratitudes grueling, vaguely inspirational, long journals of gratitudes and gratitudes and gratitudes. And soon I was making other people do it. So I was in a nonprofit and I thought, this should be the way we start every meeting. Let's make 40-line gratitude lists. This is a great use of 1 hour. And soon all of us would start speaking our gratitudes like spoken word poetry. Thank you for this. Thank you for that. And like good Californians, when you'd hear something you loved, they go, mm-hmm. Mm-hmm, But pretty soon that gets pretty tiring. Have you ever been in a ritual that initially was a great idea, and then suddenly it becomes the competition of who can be the greatest and grateful person who has ever graced the earth? And so finally we had to do ungratitude lists. I am ungrateful for this practice. I am ungrateful for my medical debt. I am ungrateful for losing my house keys on the bus. I'm ungrateful to fight with my family. I'm ungrateful for this practice, Samantha, but I'm ungrateful for other things. And of course, when you begin to speak out what is true for you, you're suddenly grateful. And so sadly, by the end of our ungratitude practice, there we all were grateful for each other. But this practice, gratitude, for some, is the heart of our tradition. And we've spent time together looking at the historic roots of our tradition. What was this Unitarianism? What was this universalism? How have we been influenced by other things? We're not just wandering around. We have roots. We have a story. But what is our practice? What's our shared practice? There's a sermon from the Reverend Dr. Galen Gingrich from All Souls Unitarian up in New York that's a pretty popular sermon that he wrote about gratitude. Now, in his sermon, he shares a story about his then 12-year-old daughter returning home from school, and as these stories often go, she was on the playground. This is where all the things happen, right? They were on the playground, and you can picture it. There is a circle of youth and children. They are all of different faiths. And what do they ask her? What do Unitarian Universalists believe? This is the question on every 12-year-old UU's mind. Is like, please don't ask me that question. I just want to play handball. My parents can't even answer this. But there she was. And so the pastor asked his daughter, and what did you say? Can you guess what she said? Anyone who likes to speak out in crowds. Oh, Lisa, I have stars actually today. What is your favorite color? Blue. Okay, could I get a PA, Pam? Will you give her a blue star? This is for Lisa. Okay, who has said to the answer, what do UUs believe? We believe whatever we want. Admit it. First person to raise their hand gets another star. Julie, what's your favorite color? Green, okay. Yeah, this is not unfamiliar territory, right? So there was the daughter of the pastor saying, we believe whatever we want. Can you imagine the pastor's face when he hears his daughter say this, right? I'm already imagining it like, oh God, how do I explain what I've brought you into? And essentially, he makes this analogy. He says, saying that we believe whatever we want to believe is a little bit like saying to someone when they ask you, well, where do you live? I live wherever I want to live. It's not quite true, is it? Yeah, the heart of it is true. The free and responsible search for truth and meaning part of it is true, but it's missing something important. And so what is true, and what this pastor also says, is that many of us came out of places that were not safe for us to be our whole selves in. Many of us came out of places where we couldn't show up with our fullest mind, heart, body, sexuality, race, belief, way of being, and be embraced and held in deep belonging. That part is true. So it is good to be healed from what harms. It is good to walk in here and to say, I won't be harmed here. Not that way, at least. Probably a different way. But we can't stay there very long, can we? It's a way that gets us in the door, but it's not spiritual food to sustain the journey we have ahead of us. The analogy that this minister uses, it's a little bit like going to, I'd say, a rock concert just so that you don't hear classical music, right? You won't stay there very long. It might be soothing in the beginning if you've been wounded by classical music, but it won't really be. Where do you get to grow? Where do you get to be fed? How do you get to expand and take up all the dignified space that you deserve to take up? So it requires of us a little bit of what a pastor and mentor told me is word therapy. We have some words that we deal with together that need a little time in the chair with the therapist. One of these words is certainly the word religion. Now this word, and in particular in this sermon, this word religion, when you look at it, pull all these layers back, and you look down to its little Latin roots. That word meant to bind together. That word meant what brings a people together. And for this minister, when he conceives of religion, the binding of people together, he says it has two components that rhyme really well, so you'll enjoy this. Awe and obligation. Religion is awe and obligation. Awe, that transcendent sense of wow that we get, that overwhelms us in our bellies, in our minds, in our hearts, when we think of this incredible cosmos, when we think about our evolving bodies, when we consider that someone loves us. Ah. Obligation. our sense of responsibility to, our sense that I live and there's something required of me to be in relationship, interdependent with you. That kind of obligation that says, I don't just sit here, I have something important to do. Obligation. So when we bind together, when I say, what religion are you? And we try to hack back, because I know this is true for some of us in this room, hack back the things that have seriously wounded us. And we say, what religion am I? What we are asking is, to whom and what are you bound? To whom and what are you bound? To whom and what do you owe your awe and your obligation? Where do you live? If we go back to that question, where do you live? Well, I live anywhere. No, where do you live? Where do you place your body and say, this is my home? These are the people I value and have awe and obligation to. So if we were to say there's a practice that binds us and keeps us rooted in our awe and obligation, this minister says, if it's anything, it's gratitude. Gratitude is the Unitarian Universalist spiritual discipline that unites us in our awe and obligation. And if pressed, and obviously, I agree. I agree. When I was sitting with Theta and we were talking about this service together, and we said, well, what does gratitude even really mean to you? We were seated in our office, and she said, I think gratitude is really, really noticing. Really noticing. And her words struck my heart. You said it. I know you look shocked. I remember everything. Especially if it's worthy for a sermon, I'm like, write it down fast. You said something brilliant. You said it was noticing, and I love that because for me, gratitude is my awe and obligation to notice this world. That this world and these people are worth noticing. And there's some practical gratitude math that I can bring you into that. To give the world my attention, I have to believe it deserves my attention. That sounds little, but it's not. You have to believe this world, not some other world, not some heaven, not some other place, this one, the one you're seated in right now, next to the people you're seated with right now, that they deserve your attention, that they are worthy of your attention, that they have enough value, that you should take the life breath that you have in this moment, which we each know is short, and you should give it to them. That's gratitude math. So if I value this planet, and if I value you, what does it obligate me to do? It obligates me to act differently. So in that practice, a super practical, embodied way of life, if I move through this world believing it is worthy of my attention and that it deserves my noticing, then I will move differently, and it's worth it. I personally appreciate this. There's a book that I'm reading right now. It's from a woman named Jenny Odell, and it's called How to Do Nothing. Don't worry, I'm okay. I'll keep doing things, but How to Do Nothing, Resisting the Attention Economy. And so she writes in this book that she explores technology, she looks at Facebook, social media, she looks at television, cell phones, emails, and the seemingly constant array of things that tell you, this is urgent, you must do it now, Elizabeth. Exactly. This email is urgent, you must answer it now. This conflict is urgent, we must deal with it now. This product is urgent, you must buy it now. This vote is urgent, this thing is urgent, that thing is urgent, that thing is urgent. And what it does to the capacity of our lives to pay attention. Now, if we think about what I just said, that our attention is our way of living a religious life, and if this culture keeps grabbing at it, it leaves us without the very center of our being, which is our ability to focus on what deserves focusing. I personally appreciate this. Another piece of word therapy, the word minister. The word minister, when you shake off each century of soil from its linguistic roots, and if you look at what is left, you see the word in Latin, to serve, which to me means to pay attention. So if a minister, and if our shared ministry is not about knowing everything, fixing everything, saving everything, and handling everything, and being all powerful, it's absolutely about paying attention. Our ability to pay attention to each other. And sometimes it's the requirement to pay attention to each other. Other times it's the request to say, let us pay attention to that which is not normally given our attention. The power of our ministry is the power of us to say, wait, something is happening here. Let's pay attention to it. Let's be awestruck by it. Let's be obligated to it. So I would say our religious obligation, if I was forced to put it into a sentence, is to notice each other and to notice this world, to take what we notice seriously and act accordingly. So if someone asks you, where do you live? Give them that address. That is where we live together. That is one thing that binds us together. So I hold that story that you demonstrated to us so beautifully, Derek and Jacob. And I like to think, what would happen if we put those brothers in a modern context? Here is what it goes. Here's how I think. The brothers worked all day. They have multiple jobs: Rover, Lyft, Uber, and an Airbnb. They both get home. They try to text each other that they hope they're okay, but they forget to click send, so it never gets sent. The TV is on, the debates are on, the candidates are speaking. Each topic is so important, but it keeps passing by so quickly. They are fact-checking on one computer as the debates happen. They're eating dinner with their other hand as they watch the TV screen, fact-checked on the computer, and try to put food in their bodies. They leave the dishes for tomorrow. They prepare to go to bed feeling anxious and uncertain about the world, and then the phone dings. One more email just came in. The email subject line says, "Response needed now." They create a half-thought-out response. They are unsatisfied with it. They click send anyway. To relax, they enjoy the photos of their friends and family on Facebook, laying in their beds with the glow on their face. And although they see pictures of ones they love, they don't really take it in, can they? But they see the photos and, they see that older brother sees the younger brother's family and goes, wow, we really need to get together sometime. I'll call them tomorrow, maybe. Scrolling and scrolling until they fall asleep, until the alarm goes off, and they do it all over again. That didn't make it into Hebrew scripture. But there we are in it. Do you recognize yourself in it? Yeah, I do. So this is why we have a spiritual practice. Because the ability to be bound together and to practice something differently lets us change what we are given. So that we are not only guided by capitalism, we are not only guided by the urgency of this culture, we're not guided only by the wounds of our pasts or our addictions or our healing of things. We are not guided only by our distraction or our fear of the future or our sometimes deep feelings of powerlessness, but we are guided by a shared response to two questions. To whom and what are you in awe of? And to whom and what are you obligated to? Then perhaps act accordingly. May we do so together. Thank you.